other places, how these autocracies function. One of the findings was that many of these dictatorships are using technology to clamp down on dissent, even things as tiny as a single tweet. Young people, young college students are being thrown in prison in Cuba, in Belarus, in Vietnam. And I documented these to show how this technology actually isn't becoming a force for freedom, but it's being turned on its head by dictatorship.
We have to leave it there. David Hoffman, Washington Post reporter, stepped down from the Post editorial board when they refused to endorse presidential candidate Mariel Garza, LA Times editorials editor who just resigned. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
The viewpoints expressed in this program are the opinions of the people expressing them, and not necessarily those of Fresh Air Incorporated, its staff, or its board of directors.
Hi, this is Al McFarlane, host of the Conversation with Al McFarlane. You're listening to 98.3 FM, KFAI, Minneapolis. I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. Well, 7 days, 1 week away from the day of decision for our country, the presidential election. Big choices, big directions for us to be concerned about that are weighing us down, but also that ought to be propelling us to make sure that our voices and our votes are heard. Our voices are heard through the casting of our votes. We remind everybody to register to vote and to vote. Vote your preference, vote your future. Your voice matters. We're going to deal with that all day today on this program, most of our program talking about the election, but also thank God for the relief that professional sports provides. And not to say that sports are not political, sports are political as well. It's a dimension that has a lot of impact on people's feelings or perceptions or understanding of the world. The analogy of sports often guides or reflects how we act in our community and civic life as well. Let me begin by welcoming my friend and colleague, Coach Leah, to talk about sports. Coach Leah, my friend, we missed you last week. Good to see you again this week. How you doing?
Doing pretty well. Boy. This is such an amazing time of year right now. I just want to soak in each and every day as we navigate this political landscape. But want to just, like you said, let's talk a little bit about some sports here. And over the weekend, there was a statue unveiling for Dwayne Wade, the NBA All-Star. And if we can see the image, I don't know if any of you guys had a chance to, but there's been a lot of flack for people thinking that the image does not look like Dwayne Wade at all. Now, the ironic thing about this is that, Dwayne Wade had a chance to weigh in on what this statue would look like almost from its inception. So, I was hoping that we could have you guys weigh in. So, if you're looking at this image and those that are simulcast with us, it is an image of Dwayne Wade with his mouth open and his eyes just clenched, and he's just made a great shot, and he's just just excited about being a member of the Miami Heat. And there are just a lot of people that say that does not represent Dwayne Wade. What do you think, Al?
Well, I'm not the person to ask, but you opened the door to bring our other guests in, and all of these guys are sports experts, I believe.
Yes.
Youssef and Jeannie is here. Jonathan Palmer is here, and a person that hasn't been on the show lately, but is a good friend of mine, and I know a sports enthusiast, Waming Mua, is here.
Yeah.
So welcome, guys. Let me ask you to jump in. You can see the image, and for those listening on KFAI, we are looking at on the live stream image of Dwayne and of the statue. So let me ask the guys around the table here to weigh in. How does that look to you? Maybe Yusef, go first.
In looking at the picture, thank you, Leah, for sharing that because it makes it very clear. It's almost expressionless. You know, it's hard to tell whether he's happy or angry or excited or having a mental breakdown or what. And his index fingers are pointing down, and it's not real clear what that symbolizes. So I'd say that the statue, in terms of the facial expressions, because he has his mouth open, it's difficult to say who it looks like, him or King Kong. But I think it raises more questions than it answers. Let me put it that way.
Jonathan, what do you think?
I have heard a lot of the criticism. I think that Yusef's on point in terms of some of the objections that come off of this. You know, when I think of statues, I maybe I'm just old school. I think of things that are regal, honoring. You know, at Morehouse, we've got the statue of Dr. King out front of the King Chapel, and you know, it's not him mid-speech; it's him, you know, pointing into the distance. So I understand why people are reacting the way they are to the statue. And this is the latest in a long line of sports statues that have come up, and people haven't felt like they actually represent the person they're supposed to represent. It's not as bad as some of the ones I've seen, which are really atrocious, but still, I think at least some things are designed.
Coach Leah, do we know who the sculptor was?
Yeah, I don't have the note. I don't have the note in front of me, but it's the same exact sculpture that did the Michael Jordan's statue, the one that's in front of the United Center in Chicago. And it was actually produced in Chicago. Let me read a quote by Dwayne Wade real quick.
Before you do, let's have Waming Mua weigh in. Waming, what are your thoughts?
You know, even Dwayne Wade accepted this statue, and I understand why he would. But I'd rather much have this statue than the one that Allen Iverson received. This was like 3 foot tall, and even worse than this one. So, given that background, I'd rather have this one than. But I mean, I think it's because someone mentioned Jordan's statue, the iconic one where he's flying in the air, and that one is just like at the pinnacle of basketball statues. And so everything after that is kind of under the shadow. And so I don't know. It's more of an artistic thing than a social thing. So in my mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Coach Leah.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about this is he actually provided the photo, and then he made several visits with the sculptor and spent many hours there. He says it was a beautiful process to be a part of. I think I visited Chicago about 4 times, and I think I stayed in probably 4 hours each time. It was just a great collaborative process with the Miami Heat, with Fine Art Studios, and also myself and my family. He goes on to say, we went through the process together and the details. You guys get a chance to look at the statue. You're going to see the bubble gum in my mouth, which I was looking real hard for that. I didn't see it from the moment. And he's speaking about the moment when they won their first title, their world championship. What I wanted to do and what I feel when it comes to the statue, when it comes to this kind of moment, I feel that it has to be something that when the fans think of you, they think of your career. Now, well said, but I agree that this does not represent that. There's just too many other questions that come up with this moment. And and he said also he didn't write a speech, he didn't write because he just wanted to be in the moment with everybody as the statue was being unveiled. And I'm just really trying to understand the thought process there. But Al, what do you think about as you see the two pictures side by side, and again, our listeners, you're looking at a headshot of Dwayne Wade with a suit, coat, and a shirt, buttoned up, no tie, and then you see side by side then the statue image.
Well, I have the thought that if he likes it, I like it. I'm comfortable with it, and I say that because I happen to be in a set of photographs by half a dozen artists. I was in an artist camp. Everybody drew pictures of me. I chose 3. One I like the most, nobody else likes. So that could be a situation. Nobody else may like it, but it speaks to him. And if that speaks to him, I'm all for it.
And it sounds like kind of that's what it went for. He picked, I mean, if he gave him the picture, this was what he wanted. He was not thinking about this is what the community wants, or this is the thing that's going to represent me for years to the community, or he did, and this is the way he wants to be represented. So
I think he might be pointing down at Shaq, who he's riding on his shoulder of.
Good one.
Exactly. So listen, I know we've got a tight schedule today. Do we have a couple minutes to talk about the origin of Hail Mary?
Just 3 minutes.
Okay, so this will be a tease. I'm going to be submitting a really great work in this next upcoming article in Inside Sports. But this past weekend, the NFL Washington Commanders win over Chicago was with a remarkable Hail Mary catch at the final seconds of the game. And so I would love for you to check that out. And the very first question that I had after I saw that is, why do we call that the Hail Mary? So that is your tease. We can come back and definitely talk about it next week, but definitely go out and get your
maybe these guys know. Let me ask him, Waming, do you know why? Unmute.
Yeah, in fact, it was actually named after a famous play that was played here in Minnesota when Minnesota had the great teams under Bud Grant, and it was against the Roger Staubach Cowboys, and it was an NFC Championship game. Whoever wins goes to the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. And Roger Staubach, they were losing at the very last second. He throws it out, and I think Drew Pearson pushed one of our Minnesota defenders off and was able to catch the ball. And one of the announcers said, "It was a Hail Mary."
Go to the next pick. Go to the next pick.
A prayer, and so that's where it originated, right there, supposedly.
So you're only a little bit right, because you have correct who coined the term. However, it has deeper origins than that. I wonder if Yusef knows.
Who coined the phrase?
No, where did it originate? Where did it originate?
Notre Dame?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And so we will tell you guys, I will definitely tell you guys more about that, because it's a very, very interesting story. And it's just interesting that it stuck with Roger Staubach. And now everybody, including, because basketball passes that are down court that could go to a player that makes a shot, they consider that a Hail Mary as well. So it's not just relegated to just football. So thanks for that time, and thanks for offering me the tease. And yeah, so check out Insight News on our sports page and learn more. And I would love to talk more about it because it's got a very, very rich and interesting history.
All right, Coach Leah, thank you so much. We'll see you next week. I'm Al
Bye-bye.
McFarlane. This is the Conversation with Al McFarlane. Again, I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along. We're on the countdown now towards the moment of decision, Election Day 2024, where the stakes are high. And our word to you, the listeners and viewers, is make sure that your voice is counted, your vision is on the table, and that you are participating in shaping the destiny, the future of our country. A lot is at stake, and I asked our colleagues here to chop it up for the next 45 minutes or so on what we're hearing and learning and feeling about the election. And a couple of more people may join us. If you listeners on KFAI want to weigh in on the conversation, just go to our YouTube channel or to our Twitter or LinkedIn channels, platforms, and you can leave a question or make a comment, or we can even bring you into the program. But let me start by asking my publishing colleague to set this up by examining something that we haven't heard a lot of in our community, and that is the dynamics in the Hmong community. And maybe, first of all, Wameng, Hmong 101, talk about Minnesota's Hmong community, America's Hmong community, and how all of that flows into the electoral process of these new citizens and voters. Unmute again.
First of all, thank you for inviting me on the show, Al. We've been friends for 15 years, 20 years.
That's right. 20 years almost,
We've been
yeah.
in the same fight, so thanks once again. The Hmong are the largest Asian group here in Minnesota. We began arriving here in Minnesota in the late 70s after the Vietnam War, in which the Hmong were one of the main allies who fought alongside the Americans in Southeast Asia. And Minnesota is the Hmong so-called capital of the Hmong world. And it's illustrated by, for instance, with gold medalist Sinise Lee, who was the Tokyo and French Olympics gold medalist, alongside Simone Biles and others. And also, civically, the Hmong have established ourselves as politicians. I think we have 7 state legislators, including a couple of senators and state representatives, and a sprinkling of city council members, judges all throughout the cities. And so we're really looked upon here as a civic leader here for the Hmong voice all throughout not only America, but the world. But I wanted to just address a large block of Hmong voters, especially the Christian Hmong voters, who are somehow siding with Trump. They have a strong allegiance with Trump, and it's just so misguided. And I just wanted to address some of that stuff here today. And I know we have that same battle in our own communities, but for my community, it strikes even harder because we are immigrants, and we are actually the brunt of everything that Trump hates and is spewing out in the world is anti-immigrant. And I just wonder why, knocking on this brick wall, why would you side with a guy who actually hates you? And so I want to address some of that stuff today.
So to put that into kind of a multicultural context, Youssef and Jonathan, I've been watching over the past several days the what I call white Christian nationalist, son of Jimmy Swaggart, Donnie Swaggart, Reverend Johnny Swaggart, had delivered a sermon or a message condemning the Black church, and in the course of it saying that he condemned in particular the Church of God in Christ, Bishop, their senior leader, for endorsing Kamala Harris's presidency bid. And he went public saying, I know you're going to call me a racist, or people are going to call me a racist, but I don't care. And he came out with this crazy bravado type voice style comment saying that he felt he had to stand up and correct the Black church and say that the Black church's support of the Democrats is supporting Satan, sin, the devil, and is sending Black people to hell. That America is a great country. I mean, you went on and on and on. It made you sick. So, so there's this white nationalist, evangelical fervor that seems to be at the center of the Trump candidacy. And the proponents, the voices of it, are reaching into the Black community. And I hear Wang saying the same thing. Absolutely. On a couple of issues. So, Yusef, have you followed that? What are your thoughts? What are you hearing? Jonathan, Yusef first.
My sense, Al, is that these people are also Christian Zionists because they stand blindly by Israel regardless of what the request is or what the consequences are. So it's not only white Christian nationalism, it's commonly referred to as Christian Zionism in both houses of Congress. My sense is, and Wang Ming, I'd appreciate your thoughts on this, is the lean toward Donald Trump in the Hmong community, the residue from General Vang Pao's relationship with the Bush and other Republican government leadership figures, where they were encouraged to be in that camp initially and have remained and found common ground, as difficult as that might be given the political reality on the ground in the Hmong community?
Well, that's actually one of the strong points of the argument I make to these Trump supporters is the fact that, sure, like some of the things that some of the good Republicans, such as, Senator John McCain, who was a Vietnam vet himself, he reached out to the Hmong community because he loved the Hmong community and allied himself. And so, yes, I understand we can vote Republican. That's fine. But when the main message coming out of the Republican camp is anti-immigrant, people eating dogs, this and that, we heard the same stuff when we got here in the 1970s and have worked really, really hard to eradicate all that racism, that blatant racism, and now it's all coming back. And so, and I just, for instance, in the Trump era, people forget the elderly Asians who were getting beat up in the streets. That all stemmed from rhetoric from Trump when he started talking about China. That sparked violence, and we were the blunt of that violence. And people forget that. It's just, come on. This is the stuff that was happening just recently. The conference, conference in New York, just recently about the Puerto Ricans. That was the same
Madison
stuff
Square.
That we faced in the 70s. And so I don't know why people are accepting it again, guys.
Jonathan, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I'm going to push back just slightly on you. It's not coming back. It never left. That's what the reality is. It is becoming apparent right now. It is being uncovered right now. And it serves us all to remember well that the Ku Klux Klan is a Christian organization, or at least claims to be a Christian organization. Within all of this, Al, you asked, you wanted to know what we were hearing. We're hearing racism, plain and simple. And the new tactic that you just described is white racists coming out and saying, I know you're going to call me a racist for saying this, in order to try to defend themselves, to put up a false narrative of this isn't really racism. You're just going to call me it. I know you're going to say this. J.D. Vance saying, people got to just get over this stuff, trying to normalize and accept this. What we are seeing is what has been at the heart of the Trump campaign, what's in the MAGA movement, what's in central now in the Republican Party, which used to be a good party. Yeah, I didn't agree with all the principles, but you used to be able to reach across the aisle. Paul Wellstone would work with people on the other side of the aisle. And now you can't do that because they show up with all sorts of flair and they call out the president and say things that are just outrageous. the fact that 1 week out, the message from the Trump campaign is, hey, we're not Nazis. That tells you all you need to know, that they've got to spend their last time trying to say that they're not Nazis, when the reality is you're following along the path pretty well. So if you're not, maybe stop doing the Nazi stuff. That's a good way to tell people you're not Nazis.
Let me bring Coach Leah back in. She didn't leave, and I'm glad she didn't, because Coach Leah, I know that you're very active in the Black church in the Texas community. And had you heard this stuff from Jimmy Swaggart? Not Jimmy, but Donnie Swaggart? Were you aware of that? How did it fall on you?
Was.
And what's happening in the circle that you're in, your Christian circle, in response to that?
So I absolutely saw the clip. I was I was just giggling because I'm like, are you serious? But this is the thing that makes the church and supposedly the Black church have to be the Black church, because the church should be just the church. But the fact that somebody would say the Black church and then go on to say all this stuff, that's this rhetoric, is how everything has become so divisive in the first place. And that has been kind of the thought and the thought process, at least in the circles that I'm in, which are pretty steep, here in the Houston Metroplex. I work alongside a lot of different denominations, a lot of different types of leadership. And I will say that, the prevailing thought is that even though we're supposed to be one church, we're absolutely divided. And there's the only way that we're going to unify is by, I guess what they're saying is actually call out what the divisions are. As, I guess say, oh, we know what this is, so that's going to make it okay. Like Jimmy Swaggart said, oh, I know you're going to call me a racist, but that does not make it okay. It doesn't make it okay that A, you are a racist, and that B, you would have to preface anything that you say by saying, I know you're going to call me a racist. And so, it really, it hurts my heart a lot of times, and you're constantly having to just be aware. Your awareness, like, I don't want to get too deeply spiritual here, but it's a lot of times I feel like I'm literally in a battle, because there's just so many forces that are at play when you're in certain circles that are supposedly supposed to be inclusive and diverse. And so, I want these next 7 days to pass, and we create something that is a phenomenon and that is historic for all the right reasons, because it's really then the opportunity to show that things can be inclusive.
I'm going to take a pessimistic voice. I won't do it right now, but before we get done, I'm not looking for. I'm looking to win, but I'm looking for the battle to unfold with the completion of next week's election. Ryan Gadusky, Jonathan, what about him?
Yes, CNN has actually banned him. Yesterday he was on a show, and he said to Mahdi Hassan, who was another panelist on there, he's Palestinian, he said, I hope your beeper doesn't go off. And it was an exchange the two of them were having, on the show. They were talking about the election, and Hassan had said, that, he's used to being not listened to and marginalized. And Gadusky went ahead and said, well, I hope your beeper doesn't go off, and then tried to move on. And the show literally stopped. I mean, people called him out for the fact that he made such a racist remark. And he tried to play it off and say, oh, I was just trying to say, I hope you're not with Hamas. but it was severe enough. It was on the Abby Phillips show, severe enough that literally they went to break, removed him from the show, and he's now been banned from the network. And it issued an apology to the audience and to Mehdi Hassan. So,
Yusuf, you've got a lot of data, about where we are. Why don't you just share some of the things that you've observed?
Thank you, Al. First and foremost, I think we need to prepare ourselves for the fact that we will not know the final results of this election until days after November 5th. In 2020, it took 4 days after the presidential election to define and determine who the winner was. It's going to take even longer this year because partly as a result of the pandemic, people have flocked to mail-in voting, to early registration, and to try and find ways around the voter suppression legislation that popped up concurrently in 38 different states, more than 400 different pieces of voter suppression, which was intended to keep poor people and people of color from voting as freely or without limitations as they had in the past. Here are some of the reasons. Number one, there are only 2 states that have proportional electoral assignments, where if it's a tie, one candidate, they divide the electoral votes among the presidential candidates based on how many votes they get. The other 48 states, it's winner take all. And if you take Pennsylvania, which is clearly the most important battleground or swing state because of the number of electoral votes and because of its importance in helping one of the candidates reach 270 electoral votes and become the next president, more than 2 million people have voted by mail or voted early in Pennsylvania. And GOP legislators in the states have passed legislation which says mail-in votes, early votes, pre-registration, none of those ballots can be counted until the day of the election or until after the polls close on November 5th at 8 or 9 o'clock at night, depending on what the state policies are. So in Pennsylvania, they have to wait to count 2 million votes. They have to check the signatures against the signature on file to make certain that the person who filled out the ballot is the person who they claim to be. We've had voter fraud in Minnesota already. Up in the Iron Range, a Republican woman's mother died, and she said her mom wanted to vote for Donald Trump. So she filled out an early mail-in ballot in her mother's name and signed her mother's name and sent it in. And because of the precautions that are taken to make sure that a person is registered, that they're alive, that they have the correct either Social Security or driver's license number, and that the signature matches the signature on file with the election office, they said, "Oh no, this is fake." She was arrested and she's being charged with 3 felonies. So we have different procedures in many states for how people vote and for how those non-election day votes are tabulated and processed and become a part of the picture. Now, if it appears that a candidate has more votes than the mail-in ballots or the early voting ballots, they're treated the same in Minnesota and not counted until election day. They may give or announce that one person has won the election before they finish counting. One of the major challenges earlier was that presidents were declared before people on the West Coast had even gotten to the polls. And they figured, why should we even bother to vote? If they're going to declare candidate X or candidate Y has already won the election, what the hell am I going to vote for? Okay. So you have mail-in ballots, you have early voting, you have different procedures, you have different timelines for how those ballots are counted. And then you need to figure out that this is going to result in days after November 5th before we know the final result of who the next president of the United States is going to be. We're not going to find out on the evening of November 5th. CBS conducted a poll, and I'll try and be brief, because they divided them among men and women, and 55% of the women were voting for Harris, 45% of the men. 43% of the women were voting for Trump, which is a significant decrease from 2020 and 2016, when 55% of white women, 56% in 2020, voted for Donald Trump, despite some of the misogynistic comments and statements that he was making about women in general, and about some women, Democratic candidates, Roseanne Barr, Hillary Clinton, the wife of Ted Cruz being ugly. I mean, just the man has no guardrails. Okay, 54% of the men are voting for Trump, and only 45% of the women. Now, one of the questions raised was, what is the mental health capacity of the two candidates? Do you feel that they're capable of being president and doing a good job? 56% of the women said Kamala Harris. 41% of the men said Donald Trump. And 41% of the women said Donald Trump. Of the men, 30% for Trump. 30% of the women said that Trump could do a good job with mental health, with his mental health, and only 36% of the males. So then they were asked which one would be a strong leader. 45% of the women said Harris. 55% of the women, 49% of the men. And then which one would be a weak leader? 45% of the women said Harris, and 56% of the men said that Harris would be a weak leader. So we see white women and white men almost balancing one another out in terms of who they're supporting, why they're supporting them, and whether or not they would be a strong or a weak leader. An interesting question was whether or not America is ready to elect a black woman president. And in August, 68% of Americans said Kamala Harris, yes. In September, or today, 74% of the people who answer the question say that America is ready to elect a black woman president. If they said no, America is not ready, it was 32% in August and only 26% today. So the opinions of Kamala Harris in terms of whether or not she would be an effective leader have decreased, have increased among those from 68 to 74% who say, yes, we're ready to elect a black woman president. And the negative comments have decreased from 32% to 26% who believe that America is not ready. Finally, people were asked what was their priority in terms of voting for president. And I'll do these in chronological order, okay? 84% said the economy, 78% said inflation, 71% said the state of democracy, 63% said crime, 53% said abortion, 45% said gun safety, and 52% said the U.S.-Mexican border. 34% said, 36% said race and diversity, 38% said climate change, and 33% said the Hamas war with Israel. So we went from the economy, inflation, the state of democracy, crime and gun safety. Race and diversity was the third lowest in terms of importance among all the people. The group that has the highest percentage of its voting body voting for Kamala Harris is black women, okay, with 98%. The second largest percentage of any category voting for Kamala Harris is, interestingly enough, black men. Although at the same time, in 2016, 7% of black men voted for Trump. In 2020, it was 12%. And in 2024, among the polling done to date, it appears that 14% of black men are voting for Donald Trump, which sounds to me like an ideal topic for a future conversation with Al McFarlane on Insight program. And perhaps even some of those black males voting for Trump could be invited to participate in a civil discussion to share their own viewpoint. Kamala Harris has 216 electoral votes. Donald Trump has 209. So Kamala Harris has a 7 electoral vote percentage right now. But you got to look at Arizona. You've got to look at Pennsylvania and Georgia are the two critical, pardon me, swing states or battleground states that could play the most important role in deciding who the president is. And both of them, it's going to take 5 to 7 days to actually count all of the mail-in and same-day ballots that are being cast. This is going to be the tightest race possibly in the history of presidential elections. And in the battleground states, the two candidates, the two primary candidates, Trump and Harris, are either tied or one has a 1% lead over the other, although Kamala has a 3 or 4 point lead over Trump in one of the states. And then if you look at Florida, Florida is leaning Republican. So we're going to have to wait to see what happens on election day and then pair that with the early voters. And the history of people who vote by mail or who vote early is that more Democrats choose to vote early or choose mail-in ballots than Republican candidates. And that's one of the reasons why there have been, pardon me, suppression efforts to try and limit who is able to register early, to vote by mail. And then the other sad fact is that in Washington State, in Portland, Oregon, and in Phoenix, Arizona, there is a history right now of people setting fires to ballots that are in drop boxes, the boxes that are located throughout Portland and Seattle and Phoenix, where people, they're like the Goodwill boxes or the large one in department store parking lots where you can drop clothes or food, and they're like 8 feet square. They're huge metal boxes. 3 states have reported that ballots are being burned, being set on fire in those boxes. And those states are trying to find a way for people to identify, to go online and see if their ballot has been received by the state or local election headquarters, and if not, to provide them with a provisional ballot that would be counted after the election only if their original ballot is not among those that are received. And they say that they dropped their ballot in that location where the ballots were set on fire. So we don't have to guess too hard about who some of the characters are that are setting these ballots on fire in these drop boxes. And many states are picking them up several times a day rather than allowing them to collect and going in only once a week or waiting until the election day to try and minimize any danger of people, setting a large number, because those drop boxes can hold thousands and thousands of ballots, which can affect not just presidential, but state, local, and congressional elections as well. So the skullduggery is already afoot, and I apologize for
it's a great
going
summary.
on so long. This is complicated, it's confusing, but it's important because these are some of the factors that are that need to be taken into consideration as a part of the process for determining who the next president of the United States will be. And that doesn't even touch the surface of the circus that took place in Madison Square Garden the other night.
Well, I said earlier that I was going to weigh in on, hopefully, I voted, or my wife and I have voted. We know who we want to win. We want everybody to have our team win. But here's the thing that I fear, Yusef and Jonathan and Waming. As I listened to the skullduggery at Madison Square Garden, as I listened to the skullduggery coming out of the mouth of Donnie Swaggart, my sense is that the opposition, the other side, is setting up a conflict no matter how things go. What do you mean? God forbid, if the Republicans win, they will feel authorized, enabled, empowered to, in their voice, make America great again. I interpret that to mean elevate white supremacist policy, practice, and authority to create a move towards an authoritarian rule and work to dismantle the idea of the American democracy. If the other side wins, if Vice President Kamala Harris and her team prevail, they are prepared to and plan to mount a disinformation campaign saying that the election was stolen again and continue ginning up ordinary people, I believe misguided people, people who feel their access to power is being eroded, limited, pushed to the margin, and they are prepared to do the unthinkable, and that is to go to civil war. That's a big statement. It's a drastic statement, but I'm wondering what you all have heard, and that's how I'm reading it. Waming, what are you hearing, first of all, and then Jonathan and Coach Leah, jump in on this.
Just briefly, I mean, we look back in history and we wonder how Hitler got to power. We wonder how Mussolini got to power. I mean, and right now the rhetoric that's coming out of the Republican camp is the same messaging. They're using the blueprint of how how Hitler got to power. I mean, and we're looking at it in live time, and we're all looking at it and seeing this disaster just about to spill on America. And again, I mean, it's just what can we possibly do about it in the next 7 days to try to avoid that disaster. And so, Al, I'm just as frightened about what could happen on November 5th as much as you, and praying and trying to knock as many doors as I can and try to change that in the right direction.
Waming, let me offer a positive note. I think that Trump didn't take over the Republican Party, he revealed it. And they've taken a play out of the Vikings playbook because the GOP is trying desperately to give this game to the opposing team in the last minute. And, they may very well be successful because they've not only gone down the rabbit hole and off the rails and out into Looney Tune country, they don't even have the advantage of being logical or sounding like they're making sense. And if you look at some of the comments from Madison Square Garden, not just from the 30 warm-up speakers, but from the former president, if you look at the commentary on the campaign trail every day, it's crazy, okay? And it's not warming the hearts of people to encourage them to come out and vote for him. Now, there are 44 million people, 47% of the voters who are going to vote for Donald Trump. They're calcified. They're not going to change their mind. They would, under no circumstances, vote for anybody else. That's a given. That's, a large percentage of the people in this country. And until there is such a time where we can sit across the table from one another, locally, regionally, on state and on national policy platforms, and have an informed discussion, this division is going to eat at the soul of that party. And, it's a lot easier to tell people what you're against than to tell them what you are for. And I think people who have informed opinions, who go to the polls prepared, understand very clearly which of the candidates represents what they are for and which of them continually represents negative energy and what they're against. So they're trying, the GOP is trying desperately to give victory to the other team in the waning days of the election. And Pennsylvania and Georgia is where this battle is going to take place.
Donald Trump and the GOP have gone ahead and decided to just lean into racism. That's where their base is. That's where they are connected into. And so that's what you're seeing from the Madison Square Garden, rally on into the rhetoric that is going throughout the campaign. They already left the idea that they're going to inspire people to come along. The people that are going to be inspired are going to be inspired from the racism. They're going to be inspired from the misogyny. They're going to be inspired from the homophobia. That is what they're centralizing their base around. And yes, you're right, Yusuf, that they're going to go ahead and gear up for the fight and claim that the election was stolen. The big difference that I'm very happy about is that he's not in the White House this time. And that when necessary, the National Guard will be called out. When necessary, the armed forces will be called out. And I don't think that they have a full idea of what a prepared America will do in response to that. Last time, everybody was caught off guard and shocked. But I think you're going to see a lot more pushback. Middle America may follow Trump for the most part, but they don't like the idea of being called racist, being a part of racist. It's fine when it's in small doses, but when you go wide like this, when you go massive like this, that makes them uncomfortable. And the average person is going to be different.
Let's listen to some of the clip from Jimmy Swaggart. I think we've got one or two of them ready, short ones. Cooper, go ahead and yeah.
Now, I'm fixing to make some people mad right now. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to be, for the statement I'm about to make, I'm going to be called a racist. And I will be called every name under the sun. But somebody needs to stand up and speak to the black church. When the largest African-American Pentecostal denomination, when that leader stands up and said, I endorse that woman, he was saying, I endorse murder. I endorse homosexuality. I endorse lesbianism. I endorse transgenderism. I endorse every evil that hell could prosper, bring up to the right. That's wrong, folks. And the black church votes predominantly for the party that is anti-God. What's going on here?
Stop it there, Cooper. That's good enough. And so my addendum will be, say the man whose family massacred a continent of human beings, the indigenous people of North and South America, a man whose family enslaved millions and transported them across the Atlantic into servitude for hundreds of years, who continues to benefit, exploit the labor, the work, the legacy of people that were oppressed and brutalized by them. And I am just more than upset at the gall. But clearly, to me, it's a question of, as Jonathan said, this side revealing its true self. And for that, I think we have to pay attention, and we have to say that, as Kamala Harris says, we're not going back. Not going back. It's not going to happen. Jonathan, Waming, as you hear this, what are you thinking?
Wag my finger at the pastor right there and ask him, why are you following a man who is a known sinner, who is known to be with prostitutes, who has been remarried and married and remarried over and over again because he can't keep his sins straight? And who has, why are you following him and calling Vice President Kamala Harris the sinner? Are you kidding me? So it's just knocking on this brick wall of trying to get sense into these people's heads.
I look at the sense of entitlement and white privilege that goes into telling another denomination or another faith body what they should and shouldn't be doing. This is, again, it's white supremacy making itself known. To come out like that and try to talk about the Black church without any regard or ground to stand on, when, as Waming was saying, that man, he's committed 8 of the 10 commandments. He's crossed through 8 of the 10. You're going to still follow that man and prop him up and say this is the leader sent by God to come through. And I look at that, and it really goes to show how much people have lost their way. I remember when the Republican Party used to tout itself as the party of family values. And yet, when you look at how anti-family they have become, when you look at the centrality of this idea of they're the godly party, and yet all the things that are happening, Rudy Giuliani is paying the price for that sin that they're committing. Donald Trump will pay the price for this. But you have audacity to talk to the Black church about who they support with the person that you have at the lead. That is just preposterous.
I mean, just put one
Coach Lee, go ahead. Go ahead.
Trump is not running for America. He is running 100% just to stay out of jail. And so if you put that in perspective, what else do you have to say?
Coach Lee, what are your final thoughts here? And then Yusef, I'll let you close us out.
Yeah, I was watching a parody on Saturday Night Live, and the question that was asked to the actor that was playing Kamala Harris was, she says, we raised over $1 billion. And then the other commentator says, well, why is the race so close? And then all she could do was put her hands up. Because there's something going on with America right now that just is so nonsensical. But, the point that you raised after my last comments are so relevant, Al, and that it's more, for me, it's more about preparation. It's more about how are we going to heal from community trauma, regardless of the outcome, because there's going to be community trauma, point blank.
Stuff, the last minute belongs to you.
Well, this is a man who said this may be the last national election in America that white people are actually able to win. Now, if a person of color had said that, all hell would have come down on every national Black leader in the country or elected Black official. But Donald Trump can play the race card every time he opens his mouth. I want to thank Coach Leah for being with us for a full hour. Say hello to Michelle and Maya for joining us in the comment section. And simply say that Mr. Swaggart was terribly disrespectful for suggesting the Black church is a monolithic organism. There are many, many, many different denominations, and the Black church does not speak with one voice, nor does he. So let's get to the polls. Remember, your vote is your voice, and if you don't vote, you don't have the opportunity to complain or comment.
Can I just say this real quick? Make sure you vote the whole ticket. Every race. You have to vote the whole ticket, people.
the backside too.
All right.
Yes.
Listen, guys, thank you so much. And listeners, viewers, thank you so much. You know what to do. If you're not registered, do it. You must vote. I'm Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time. Take care.